What are 6 other effects of lordosis and what can we do about them? You can see the first 4 on the screen now, but we're going to cover these 4, another 2, some anatomy, and then 2 primary stretches at the end. The first 4, as you may have already read, anterior pelvic tilt, thigh internally rotates, knee move inwards, arch collapse. Now these can kind of be a cascade, one onto the other. It doesn't mean they are going to happen, it doesn't mean they do happen, but it just means that they can happen. So the primary effect, obviously, of lordosis is the exaggerated curve of the lumbar spine. That's a exaggerated size of the lumbar spine as well, but exaggerated curve of the lumbar spine. So what the first thing that can happen of that, as you can see here, is the pelvis tilts forward. So the front goes down and the back goes up, effectively. What then happens, hip internally rotates, which, as you see here, causes the thigh to internally rotate. So that rotates inward, which then causes the knee to move inward. And then finally, as we get down to the bottom, you can then get an overpronation and the flattening of the foot as well. So what we basically need to do is reverse these 4, but what we are going to do next is look at the next 2. And they're happening above the pelvis. So this we've done below the pelvis, now we're looking above the pelvis. Again, it doesn't mean that all of these are going to happen, but they certainly can happen. And it is rounding of the upper back and lordosis of the neck. Now, there's sort of 2 reasons why this can happen. So obviously, let's just say we've got the exaggerated curve here, and we've got the psoas, which comes off all of these muscles. So L5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So psoas comes all the way down onto that sort of front, onto the inside of the thigh. Now, with regards to the exaggerated curve that happens here, as a very simple means of compensation, it can exaggerate the curve at the mid-back. So just a means of compensation, because it's trying to maintain balance, it will, because of the rounded or exaggerated curve at the lumbar spine, it will just round the lower back more. Now, if the neck stays straight, the head will point downwards. So in order to be able to look up and forwards, what we will do is create a lordosis at the neck, so we are then able to look up and forwards. So this is just by simple means of compensation. Now, because of the tightness through the psoas, it doesn't just end at L5, it goes all the way up to T12. Now, if we've got tightness, and up into the diaphragm as well. So what can happen because of these fibers is it can start to pull and create that exaggerated curve of the thoracic spine. So again, there can be tightness from the psoas, it can be just down to compensation. So we've got all these different types of things that it can be. But what we need to start doing now is thinking about how we can overcome it. So what we're now going to do is we're going to look at a collection of muscles, and then we're going to look at the 2 primary stretches. And the collection of muscles come in the form of the deep front line. And the deep front line is a fascial line. So you can look up at anatomy trains. This is the deep front line that's within it. So what happens here is what you can start to see now is everything that we've just described when it comes to muscles and fascia is here. Because we've got the adductor group, which can pull the knee inwards. We've got the psoas, the iliacus. So all of these muscles come together in this line to create, which is essentially just global tightness, you could say, from top to bottom, and it's just creating a body that has tightness all the way through this line. So we've got tightness going all the way through the inside of the foot, up the shin, pulling the knee inwards. We've got the muscles up here tilting the pelvis forward and exaggerating the curve here. Again, that creates internal rotation here and all the muscles involved within that. So you can start to see what we need to start tackling. And essentially, it's this deep front line. So what we need to try and do is look at stretches that can start to manage this line as a whole. So what we're going to do is look at those two primary stretches next. Stretch number 1 is primarily for the adductors. You may well get some psoas and iliacus involved as well as the adductors, but it's primarily an adductor stretch. Now, with regards to this, there are other exercises that will need to come along with it, but for now, we're just going to look at these two stretches for the very simple reason that they are simple to do and everyone can do them. Now, with regards to the adductor stretch, so that's what essentially this one is, adductor, and we're targeting the inside of the leg, basically from the knee up into the pelvis. So we go into this position. Now maintain a good curve at the spine. That doesn't mean in the lordotic curve, but just that natural curve. So you might want to try and flatten it off. And then all you're basically doing is trying to get this foot as far away from this knee as possible. With one caveat, that try and keep the leg straight, because the further away you go, the more the knee wants to bend. So it's trying to find that optimal range between getting the distance between here and here as far apart as possible, but also keeping the knee straight and maintaining the curve at the spine. That's going to give you the optimum stretch through the area. And what you may even find is it starts to go elsewhere as well. And that's not a problem, because although this is called an adductor stretch, there's no problem with us finding tightness elsewhere within any stretch. So go into the stretch, just hold it there and allow that to loosen. What we can then do is come onto a stretch like this. Now, I would describe this as more of an anterior chain stretch, because what we're trying to do here is basically stretch from here all the way up to here. So we're trying to create length all the way through the body. But again, what we are getting is all the way through that area. So we may get psoas from sort of here to here, iliacus from here to here. We're lengthening the spine, so we're getting that rounded portion. We're optimizing that by lifting the arm up and then trying to minimize that curve there. Obviously, what that should help do is bring the head into an upright position, so we're looking forward. If you want to, and you can get rectus femoris involved by lifting the foot up like so, and that will start to get rectus femoris, which goes from here up to here. But what we're trying to do is go through as much of that deep front line as we possibly can to lengthen that area. Now again, there's sort of a caveat and a key that with this one is when we go into a little bit, so you can see here I'm not going into a huge hip extension, because if I go into too much of a hip extension, I will probably get an exaggerated curve here, which is kind of then defeating the object of what I'm trying to do. So I just want a small bit of hip extension so I can still manage that exaggerated curve at the spine, because I want to try and keep that as natural, or even you could say as flat as I can. So what we're then doing is getting as much through the anterior chain or that deep front line as we possibly can. Again, if you want to, you could push this knee out to the side, and what it will do is it will get the adductors on this side of the leg. So there's different things that you can do with these two stretches, and this is why they're so fundamental and primary to this to these 6 lordosis effects. So if you want help with it, if you want to get started, you can click the link below. You'll go through to my How to Correct a Lordosis 12-week program. These stretches are in there. There are other exercises as well. All the workouts are follow along. So you basically just follow along all my workouts for the 12-week period, and what you will notice is loosening muscles and the ability to come out of that lordotic posture, and it's going to give you a much more effective posture through the spine, through the hips, the knee, the foot, and also up into the upper back, head and neck. So many thanks for watching. My name is Chris. I'll speak to you in the next tutorial.